Connected, committed, purpose. That isn't just a slogan. It's, of course, the new reality for the Vancouver Canucks. Ryan Johnson and the Sedins are officially leading this team into a new era. And in my opinion, those three words, connected, committed, purpose, are the reason that this leadership group changes everything for the future of this roster. And of course, as you may have heard, the Canucks held a press conference earlier today. I'm recording this Thursday night, and this will, of course, come out Friday. So technically, yesterday, at the time of you watching this, they announced that Daniel and Henrik Sedin are now the co-presidents of hockey operations. And of course, Canuck fans already have a new term coined for them, the co-Tohos, twins of hockey operations. I absolutely love that one. And of course, Daniel and Henrik formally introduced the 13th general manager in Vancouver Canucks history, that of course being Ryan Johnson, who we knew was the internal candidate all along. And of course, it ended up coming down to Evan Gold and Ryan Johnson, and the Sedin twins made the official or the final decision on who they wanted as general manager, and it ends up being Ryan Johnson. So first, we're going to go over an article that talks about this announcement. As you can see here, Canucks name RJ, new GM, Daniel and Henrik as co-presidents of hockey operations, written by our good buddy Tyson Cole. And we're going to skip Ryan Johnson's history because we kind of already went over that in our previous video talking about the GM search. But of course, as we mentioned, the Canucks search came down to both Johnson and Boston Bruins assistant GM and Providence Bruins GM Evan Gold. Of course, we all know there was conflicting reports that had Gold pegged for the job on Monday, while others said it was premature to appoint one at that time, that being, of course, Elliot Friedman. And of course, this is a similar move to what the Toronto Maple Leafs did, naming a new GM and bringing in a pair of franchise legends. Of course, there wasn't a pair. It was Matt Sundin for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and of course, Daniel and Henrik for the Vancouver Canucks. So there's that. But I did want to specifically go over the takeaways. So let's check out 10 takeaways from the Sedins and Johnson's introductory press conference. This one, once again, written by our good buddy Tyson Cole. And let's start off right off the bat. These are his 10 takeaways. I'll throw in some of my own takeaways as well. But I guess one of the takeaways right away is the fact that we heard Francesco Aqualini actually speak. He did not take questions. Apparently, that is going to come later. Apparently, Francesco Aqualini will make himself available to the media. We'll see if that actually ends up happening or not. But this is what Francesco Aqualini said. To our fans, we appreciate that this rebuild will require patience. So right off the bat, he starts off by actually saying the word rebuild. So not only have we heard it from Jim Rutherford, we heard it from Patrick Allvin, the now former general manager. We now even heard it from ownership. Mind blown. But there's a part in this that actually blows my mind even more so than him saying rebuild. It is this part entirely. We are 100% committed to rebuilding the roster into a championship caliber team. What? He actually said rebuilding the roster into a championship caliber team. He didn't say playoff team. He said championship caliber team. Mind blown. The fact that he said that really stood out for me and admittedly had me shocked that he actually uttered those words. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, what you guys thought about him uttering a championship caliber team, not a playoff team, which kind of contradicts what Jim Rutherford said on, remember how he was like, he didn't exactly say playoff team, but he said something about like having Coots on the roster. He mentioned whoever the third overall pick is playing next year. It seems like we're not doing that anymore. But anyway, let's continue. He did say rebuilding and competing hard are not mutually exclusive. Daniel, Henrik, and Ryan, you have the full support of ownership. We'll see if that's actually the case. We will provide you with all the resources you need to succeed. Of course, later in the press conference, Daniel shared that he and Henrik have 100% autonomy to do whatever they want to help improve this organization. Once again, take it with a grain of salt. We will see if that actually ends up happening because we have heard this before. And we've been down this road before, as Tyson mentions a little bit later here. And the real question is, will this time be any different now that it's two of the best Canucks of all times? Both, I mean, I echo what Tyson says here. I sure as heck hope so. And I do have a lot of optimism that hopefully they will, or that they, being ownership, will let Henrik, Daniel, and Ryan do their thing and not meddle like we've heard about in the past. They did mention fixing culture is at the top of their to-do list. So obviously, as we all know, culture has been a massive talking point over the last 2 seasons, but it sounds like those issues date back further than that. Now, when the Sedins were, of course, leaders of the team, Henrik was captain, Daniel was had an A on his jersey, you would rarely hear about locker room issues back then. But over the last few years, that has been lost. A locker room, of course, rift, divided by 2 superstars, and played a hand in, of course, the rebuild that we find ourselves in today. According to the Sedins, that is priority number 1. We've got to show up every day and lead by example. That is, of course, the Sedin mentality. Henrik said, culture is huge. You cannot win without it. That's impossible. You cannot be sustainable without it. I absolutely love that quote from Henrik. And that right there kind of helps with my optimism on these 3 hires. For us, the culture piece is our main thing to fall back on over the next little bit here. And of course, Ryan Johnson himself shared a similar sentiment to that by saying, I think anybody that has worked with me, alongside me, players that have played with me, they understand there's some real non-negotiables. Before we talked about wins and losses or getting to that point, the environment will be first and foremost. That will be very clear. So already what I'm seeing here between the Sedins and Johnson is the fact that they're working together. They have one mindset, they have one vision, and that I'm really ecstatic for. Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments. The environment is something that I will establish now. He emphasizes on the word now, as I'm talking to players, not in September. So he's going to change the environment now, which is obviously great to hear. They'll be very aware that when they walk into this facility in September, they've got to make a decision of who they want to be as a player and who they want to be as a person and a teammate. And they'll know that. We will establish that very, very quickly. So that is, of course, music to my ears. Let me know if it echoes the same to you guys. They also spoke about how the culture shifted after the deadline. Now, with Sedins and Johnson at the helm, they'll find those bad apples and they'll, of course, address them. This is something else that kind of stood out for me as well. And that was, of course, the timeline when it comes to this rebuild. Some people have said 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 7 years. They basically said they're not going to rush this process. And in fact, Ryan Johnson himself said there isn't going to be a timeline. Now, it says here, for many fans, this was going to be a big worry, of course. It wasn't too long ago that fans heard Jim Benning continuously preach that they could turn this around in 2 years. We did not hear that in this press conference. This organization has failed to commit to a proper rebuild and instead has tried to accelerate the process to help them get back into contention. And while that's obviously never worked and rarely does, it ever result in a Stanley Cup. So, of course, hearing Johnson say that he doesn't want to rush the process, that he wants to build through the draft, is, of course, a breath of fresh air after the handful of retools, hybrid, whatever you want to call it, fans had to deal with over the last decade. Here's exactly what Ryan Johnson said. I think to put any type of timeline on the rebuild is unfair to the process. It's more about building the environment first. It's making sure the staples are there, the things that we believe in, creating a safe environment where players can improve, can make mistakes, and can have resources. We're going to do this step by step, and we're not going to race through it. Right there, more optimism right there. We're going to be strategic with everything we do. We're going to be aligned with everything we do. Again, I mentioned earlier, they both have the same vision, the 3 of them, so that we know as a group we're sticking to the vision that was talked about in May of 2026. Well, so as I mentioned, there is no timeline on this rebuild. They're going to take their time. They're going to do it their way. It is going to be a well thought out process. They're not going to rush it. And Henrik actually mentioned something that was quite fascinating. He, of course, mentioned that the fastest way to get to this stage is to actually go slow. Here's the exact quote. Do this as fast as possible. We have to be very careful and go slow. I think that's the fastest way to get to where we want to be. We've got the full support from ownership. They're putting in and giving us all the resources to do whatever we want and need to make this as fast as possible, but to not do it too fast. I absolutely love that quote from Henrik. And no, of course, a lot of fans are going to question that, whether or not we should believe Henrik and Daniel and Ryan Johnson, because we've heard this before. But what happens when they sniff a little bit of success and some of their high draft picks start to crack the lineup, as we mentioned with Braden Coots, whoever the third overall pick ends up being, and make an impact? Will they cave and try to fast forward the process? That's what a lot of Canuck fans are worried about. That Aqualini will see this and he'll pivot. He'll want to, do it now. But I do think Henrik, Daniel, and Ryan will put a stop. They'll be like, no, we're going to stay the course. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. But that's just the optimist in me. And that's how much faith I have in both Daniel and Henrik, as well as Ryan Johnson. That's where teams actually stunt their rebuild. However, with some of the other candidates reportedly saying they could turn this situation around quickly, it doesn't sound like Johnson was one of them after what he said today. Of course, we also found out what the chain of command will be. We speculated, on Monday and actually over the weekend that the Sedins were getting bigger roles. We just didn't know how big. And even Elliot Friedman himself said he may have understated just how big those roles were. And of course, now we know they are co-presidents of hockey operations. They go from player development to co-presidents of hockey operations. We were, of course, a little unsure about who would report to whom among them. And of course, there was that rumor that came out, I believe it was Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken, that they may be above Johnson. That was, of course, clarified in the press conference. It was reported Johnson will, of course, report to the Sedins, whom will report to ownership. But with how often all three of the new regime talked about being aligned in the decision-making process, it sounds like it will be a full committee, which includes ownership. Of course, the question about Adam Foote was, of course, brought up not once but twice. So this is what. Okay, Ryan, they don't actually have the quote here from Ryan Johnson, but he basically said, it would be unfair to judge Foote based on the circumstances he dealt with last season, which is fair to say, and he's not wrong there. The fact that he dealt with injuries, goaltenders, and you name it, fractured locker room, toxic locker room, he dealt with that. But he did say they will evaluate all departments in the coming days. So he may not have said, flat out said, Foote is gone, or they're going to bring in a new coach. He did say it was unfair to judge him based off of that, which is, like I said, it's fair to say. But he didn't also rule out bringing in a new coach either. And of course, we all know there's one leading candidate, and that is, of course, Manny Malhotra, because he has, of course, worked closely with Ryan Johnson and the Sedins. So it could be a four-headed dragon. By the time that the season starts, it could be Henrik and Daniel, Ryan Johnson, and Manny Malhotra. He could be the missing piece, but we will wait and see if that is actually the direction that they decide to go in. Now, of course, in this press conference, all three of them talked about Elias Pettersson. And of course, we knew that was going to come up, and we knew people were going to ask about Elias. So they did talk about him, both Henrik and Daniel, as well as Ryan Johnson. Daniel said this with Elias: we've been through this as players. You're going to have some really good seasons. You're going to have some tough seasons. We found that after a long career, looking back, our best seasons we had, we were well prepared. That is everything you can control. It's how hard you work in the summer, mentally ready to get when training camp hits. I think that's the one message to him preparation. And Johnson kind of echoed that as well. He says his initial thought on Elias, I want to wipe away all expectations. Some Canuck fans might not like that part of the answer, and that's fair. He says, wipe away all the expectations that may exist in him. Just like the rest of our hockey club, not just our players, but our staff, we're asking them to come into September the most prepared they could be. For our players, it's going to be physically and mentally to make a decision. Now, of course, we'll have to wait and see what Pettersson we end up seeing in September. Will he come in ready to play? Will he have put forth the needed effort and training to spark a bounce back? We'll see. And it's a little too early to speculate on that. Or will we see him get off to a slow start for the third year in a row? If that's the case, I'm not sure how long his leash will be with the new management group. Of course, and I'm paraphrasing here, Ryan Johnson did say, basically, if you don't do, okay, I'm trying to paraphrase what he said. But he did say something about when they were, talking about him. Maybe we'll find it later on in this and we'll get back to it. But there is, of course, hope in this roster. Canucks are, of course, in a slightly different situation than most rebuilding teams. Thanks to the Quinn Hughes trade, the Canucks already have a few promising pieces to start said rebuild. Do they have the true difference maker to push you over the top? No, they don't, not quite. But they aren't completely starting from scratch, at least not according to Daniel and Henrik Sedin. Shared that they saw something to be hopeful and excited about over the last quarter of the season. To be honest, I think the last 15 to 20 games, I was extremely excited when I left the rink after games because I saw something special happening with that group. And that was Daniel. So I think there's a lot of good people in that room that want to do well for this organization. They give us all hope. And this is what Henrik said, and this I found quite fascinating too. When you left those games, how many fan bases would have the wave going around the rink in the last game of the season after such a bad season? And I think the fans saw something that changed, and that's why we're very excited going forward. These quotes should mean something to fans, considering they were on the ice nearly every day with the players working with them. Of course, and this is Tyson's biggest worry, is that now that they're upstairs, they won't have the same impact for the players on the ice. They did say that, because they were asked, will you be on the ice, with the players? And Daniel said no. Which is understandable. They're moving to the front office, they're co-presidents, and not a whole lot of co-presidents are on the ice with the players. But we'll see who they end up bringing in to replace them in player development, which we'll probably find out over the next couple months. Now, Ryan Johnson was asked, a bit of a tough question. Obviously there's this thing going out there, or there's rumor going out there that he's not cutthroat enough, and is a bit of a narrative. He shot down that narrative, and he basically said, I think it's a little bit of a false narrative. One thing I do is create a space in between that eventually I have to let people know that I don't want them to perform well because it looks good on me. I want them to perform well because I have their best interest in mind. Then it allows me to create a safe space of conversation. It creates a space for me to then make those difficult decisions and to be able to say, we talked about this. I'm moving you out because you didn't understand. Now, that was the quote that I was getting at earlier with Elias Pettersson. The fact that he said, we talked about this. I'm moving you out because you didn't understand. That is what I meant. If Pettersson does not come into camp in shape, Ryan Johnson will likely have this type of conversation with him, saying, we talked about this. I'm moving you out because you didn't understand. I know Pettersson's got the no move clause, but this would probably be something like a conversation he would have with Pettersson if he doesn't come into camp in shape and has a slow start again. But he goes on to say, so I think it's a false narrative because I'm empathetic. I can't make tough decisions, but people that work alongside me know that that's far from the truth. Now, the Sedins also, they outlined the entire process of what happened, over the weekend, Monday, Tuesday, into Wednesday. So basically the entire process was once they received and accepted ownership's offer, I guess over the weekend, or maybe even earlier than that, the Canucks GM search was down to two, Evan Gold and Ryan Johnson. But that didn't stop them from doing their due diligence as they asked about the previous candidates to get a full grasp of their options, including Gold and Johnson. They revealed that they were actually involved in the final 2 interviews with both Evan Gold and Ryan Johnson, and shared that they spent a day with each of them. They gave Gold high praise. Daniel even said him by, referred to him by name, Evan. But after a few days to mull it over, they ultimately decided that Johnson was the right guy for the job. Sedins mentioned they were given 100% autonomy, as we mentioned, and it appears they actually had it as they made the final big decision about who they wanted as GM. And I reiterate that. And Francesco even said it too. The Sedins made the final decision on who the GM was going to be. After they accepted the role of, co-presidents, it was up to them on who their GM was. Now, this was a big talking point in this press conference as well with the Sedins, as we all know how they are with the community. And they want to get back to being involved in the community because they feel as though it kind of tapered off a bit. Canucks haven't been as involved in the community as they have in years prior. And we all kind of saw that with Rutherford and Alvin. My buddy Clay even said, they weren't Canuck guys. They, came from Pittsburgh. That just wasn't one of their priorities. But that is something that the Sedins want to bring back. Now, over the last few years, of course, as I said, we really haven't seen a ton of community involvement out of this version of the Canucks, but according to Daniel, that's about to change. Looking back 26 years ago, when we flew into the city, Brian Burke told us that this was the #1 organization in the league when it comes to community involvement. We need to get to that point. We should be the #1 organization when it comes to community involvement. We're going to ask our players to do a lot. I think it's so important for us as players that we did all those things. It puts perspective in life. Fans will respect it. You might have a bad game here and there, but if you're out, you do the work in the community, they can certainly buy into what we're trying to be. And I thought that was great coming from Hank and Daniel. There were a lot of things that Canuck fans can take positively from this press conference. They said the right things. I completely agree on that, especially that whole, timeline thing was perfect answer from Ryan Johnson. And they emphasized not rushing this process and building a positive environment at the forefront of their hockey operations. Now, of course, it's time to see if they can actually back up their words with their actions leading up to one of the biggest drafts in franchise history. Now, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I'm very optimistic with what Daniel and Henrik said, as well as Ryan Johnson. I'm not going to judge them based off of day one. We still need to see action, but I am optimistic that these 3 guys can help turn this franchise around. That I know for a fact, but I want to know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you guys think about Daniel and Henrik being the new co-pohos, or if you want to coin it, co-tohos, whichever one. Let me know what you guys think about them being the new presidents. What do you guys think about Ryan Johnson being the new GM? Of course, this was the guy that a lot of Canucks fans for a really long time were calling for to be the next GM. That was even before we even knew who Evan Gold was. But I'm going to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section down below. And of course, I want to give a shout out and thank you to the sponsor of this video, none other than, of course, DraftKings Sportsbook, which is an official sports betting partner of the NHL. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here, and DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, has a new customer offer. Bet player props, bet live from the opening faceoff to the final horn, where every moment matters. New DraftKings customers bet just $5 and you get $100 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN so you're ready for the moment. Once again, that is code THPN. Turn $5 into $100 in bonus bets instantly in partnership with DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-MY-RESET. New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino in Kansas, wager tax pass-through may apply in Illinois. 21 and over in most states. Void in Ontario. Restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos. Limited time offer.
Let me know what you guys think. What are some of your takeaways from this press conference? Let me know what they are in the comment section down below. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, on your way out, you can like the video and you can subscribe to the Line Change for more Canucks and draft-related content. You can also become a member to receive exclusive perks and members-only videos, including early access to videos such as this one. Once again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.